The 2025 MotoGP season is over. It's the end of term. This is going to be a sketchy episode of the Race MotoGP podcast. I'm Matt Beer, back with you this week. Simon and Val are still together at Valencia, but they're sitting a long way apart in the media centre. You can see him, yeah. Val's waving, Simon's noticed. Val is sat under a sign that on my screen just says Gen Val, like General Val, which seems like grandiose. And yep, there we go. Val's saluting for the benefit of anyone on the audio version of this podcast.
Which might be the only version. We don't know how well this video recording is going to go, but yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, though, that is a permanent risk every time we sit down to record, isn't it? Like the amount of times producer Rob or producer Johnny in the Monday morning meeting has listed reasons why he hates me. Well, they hate me. But it's fine. We'll do our best with the situations we have. Aprilia ended the season with a 1-2. I don't know how long that'll be remembered, Simon and Val, because this was not the most fantastically entertaining way to end a season.
I disagree.
Oh, go on.
I think it's we're in Valencia, Matt. Valencia is the worst place in history to end MotoGP championships because it produces boring racing. And I think this was actually, as Valencia races goes, this was not an awful one. I mean, things happened.
Yeah.
People kind of overtook each other, mainly because some people went backwards, but like it was quite entertaining. I feel like the reason that the Aprilia battle won't be remembered is because TV direction at the end was a bit rubbish, and we spent most of the time watching the battle for third as first and second hunted each other down, and they were both in Aprilias. Clearly the TV director is a Ducati fan, but it wasn't the worst Valencia race we've had, and I thought it was all right.
It's totally fine. But it's just a question of other equally fine races did not get the same grace from Simon this season. So I do think it's just the fact the season's over.
The bar is lower when it's the bar is, it's Valencia. The bar is low for entertaining racing. So
I think for me as well, I know we weren't at Valencia last year, but it's a weird one where it feels like we were because it's the end of the season, so we must have been, but we weren't. But I think part of it is this season was done and dusted so long ago as a competitive thing. I mean, I never expected we'd still be seeing how far Pecco Bagnaia could fall in the championship come the last day of the season. I thought that would be settled quite some time ago as well. I thought his floor was third rather than fifth. We'll get on to Pecco a little bit later. But yeah, this was a flat one for me following it from home, possibly as much because of the lack of any kind of end of season pressure, tension, narrative, as much as it being at Valencia.
Do you want an end of season narrative? I think I showed up to the paddock every day this weekend feeling ill in a different kind of way. And I want to offer some context to people who don't do end of season MotoGP races in Valencia. You know how those undiscovered tribes in Peru, we're always afraid to send somebody over, like to make contact, because we're afraid that their bodies won't handle the stuff that we're sick with. Well, this place experienced is like, I think like COVID-60 exists here already because of all the people gathering around the world and sort of creating this horrible Ouroboros of illness at the end of the season. And I, having not done the full race, the full season of immunization, I've had a fun one in that regard. Not enjoyed it massively.
I turned up to the paddock every day wondering what fresh hell the Valencian police was going to find to inflict upon me on the journey in.
Was it mostly on the journey in that happened? Because I thought we've been doing the in-car audio bonus mini podcasts in the Race Members Club, but those have been on the way out of the circuit, and you didn't seem to manage to get arrested or lost too badly. It
wasn't great. In was bad. It kind of felt on multiple factors like Valencia kind of forgot how to have a MotoGP race because we didn't come last year. There was a lot of kind of traffic chaos in the mornings in particular. When you're leaving at 7 a.m. to make the 20-minute journey, and it's taken 45 minutes at 7 a.m., that's a bit of a red flag that things are not going particularly well. I know someone who took them 2 hours, not that long after us this weekend at one point. So it's just been a bit chaotic.
At least you're all full of energy and health for it. Aprilia ends the season with a 1-2. Loads of the people in the Race Members Club who are sending questions in about this race are talking about the guy in second. I want to quickly talk about the guy in first. Marco Bezzecchi ends the season with another win. His run since basically August, with a few slip-ups and a few dramas in the middle of it, has been pretty tremendous. We've talked loads about Bez. We've talked loads about Aprilia getting better and better. I'm going to flip it very slightly. Got a question from Ridwan Bello in the Race Members Club who says, Ducati cannot go back to the GP24. I don't think they would ever admit they did it, even if they did do it. They really need to improve the GP25 big time because Aprilia looks like a genuine championship contender. What do you think Ducati needs to do for 2026, effectively defend off this Aprilia that's getting better and better? I think at least one of you, probably Simon, is going to say, doesn't matter, don't do anything, you got Marc Marquez. Marquez will win the championship. But Marc Marquez is one person who is currently injured, and without him, Ducati only just hung on to its run of podiums this weekend. So I think this is a fair question. Aprilia is ending the season in such good form. Does Ducati have like a big problem to solve against this bike going into next season? Because if Marquez gets hurt again, it's not got a lot without him right now.
I mean, Ducati can go back to the GP24. There's absolutely no reason why they can't, as long as they convince Marc Marquez to do it.
Or pride, I think, is like the big reason why they wouldn't openly.
But they could just rename the 2024 to the 2026 and not tell us, and that would probably work. I mean, we don't know what the engine internals are either way. So if that's the issue, and that's still the problem, and we don't know for sure one way or another because it's Ducati, then they could just go back to that engine. Maybe that's what they're going to do on Tuesday morning. We don't know. But it would maybe fix the problem. Yeah, the aero is different and things like that, but you use that again because that's not where the problems are coming from. I still don't think that the issues with the current spec of bike are completely insurmountable. I think that the bike, it's not awful despite the fact that Pecco Bagnaia has had a pretty poor year, because at the end of the day, Fabio Di Giannantonio stuck one on the podium on Sunday, today. So the Pecco thing is different from the problem, but I don't know. I've said for a long time that this time last year, the end of last season, was Ducati's peak. That was the point where everything was going to be downhill in some form or another from there. And I still stand by that. I think that has absolutely been proven out by this season. But I don't think that momentum is going to continue to a point where at the end of next year, someone else is going to be standing on the stage at the prize giving, collecting the big trophy. And not just because they've got Marc Marquez. Because any situation where you can put Alex Marquez second in a championship was that's not a slight on Alex, but he has never been a P2 championship rider in his life in MotoGP, and the fact that they can do that and they've been able to do that means that there's still plenty of potential for this bike if they can fix the number one problem, which is inside Pecco Bagnaia's head.
Should they be worried about getting smoked at Phillip Island and Valencia, two places where I don't think shouldn't have been expected to get smoked given the previous handful of years? Yeah, I'd say so. But it's a question of there's no way for them to necessarily guarantee a title next year the way titles have felt guaranteed for a while with the bike that they're going in with. But so late in a regulation cycle with all the freezes, with all the concessions, etc., I guess that's something you kind of have to accept, that you can't guarantee it. It's a huge problem for every manufacturer if their lead rider goes down with an injury. Like we're not sat here thinking, what is Aprilia going to do with its championship if Marco Bezzecchi is injured in preseason testing next season? Then do they need to urgently rework the bike in some way, shape, or form? Ducati, inevitably, it had to sort of make its bets. It had to make its priorities. We heard Gigi Dall'Igna at the start of the year or in the off-season or whatever talk with regret about the fact that Jorge Martin was lost contractually, that Enea Bastianini was lost contractually. Their lineup was weakened relative to the behemoth, to the juggernaut that existed last year. And that was a price worth paying to get Marc to where he is right now. And ultimately, if you have Marc and he stays healthy, the rest of it isn't that important. But it is good, actually, for us. I think that we're in a position where Ducati can't feel guaranteed about the championship, that it can't feel like, if Marc goes down, any of our other five guys will do it. If Marc goes down, Fermin Aldeguer will do it with these next season or whatever, etc. Or Marc's teammate, who seems fundamentally scarred by this season, and I'm not sure will ever be the same again, but that's off-season content, I guess. So yeah, I wouldn't, honestly, if I was them, it's a ridiculous thing to say. They've done what they've done for 2026 already. I wouldn't worry about it too much. The odds are still good. Any other manufacturer going into next season would still take the odds that Ducati is facing.
I mean, the reality is that Marc missed the last 5 rounds, the last 5 Sundays of the season, and they still won the Riders' Championship by 200 points over the first non-Ducati, and they won the team and the Constructors' Championship by 350 points over the next non-Ducati. There's margin.
There's margin, but I don't think this is like horrendous recency bias from me. I think that margin is semi-irrelevant in the context of how this season is ending and the fact that with the new regulations coming for 2026 is probably such a carryover of the end of 2025, potentially. Take Marc out of it, and we have not been in a situation at the end of any season in like recent MotoGP history where Ducati's had this many question marks over the performance of its bike. Now, that is largely, I agree, because of the performance of 5-6 of its rider lineup. The best of those guys, I think, talent-wise, now is Khorounzhiy, who is too inexperienced and too prone to running into people at this age to count on too much. Everyone else, you mentioned Didier got on the podium today. Didier has not been having the Alex Marquez season. The GP25 is not that bankable that Didier has done that. But also, we don't actually know a lot about Didier as a consistent MotoGP frontrunner because his career has been like, oh, he's going out of MotoGP. Suddenly he's brilliant with Frankie Carcetti. Oh, what next? He's a bit random still at this point. We don't know with him. Alex Marquez has a wonderful season on a really well-sorted familiar bike. But look at all of Alex Marquez's career so far. There's loads of question marks. Even if Ducati could have all those question marks and still feel fine if it looked around and everyone else was kind of where Yamaha is right now. But Aprilia and Bez are on this run that looks better than anything anybody has put together against Ducati in years. So, yes, when you've got Marc Marquez fit, that is probably irrelevant and all that margin is still there. But if there's if Marc has another injury of some kind, this looks really difficult for Ducati, and I think that is an off-season worry for 26, at least.
The one thing is that Ducati have got really lucky, and Aprilia in particular, and Honda have got really unlucky with kind of timing, in that the two ones that are on the up are about to lose all momentum, and the one that's on the down is about to be able to take a pause to reset their number 2 star. It couldn't have happened at a better or worse time for those 3 teams. It really, Ducati need to, never mind the bike. If Ducati actually want an insurance policy mark next year, they have to spend the winter trying to fix Pecco and get Pecco feeling like that's the number 1 priority for them. Whereas the other 2 have to find a way, I guess, to essentially plan for the worst in case Ducati does fix Pecco. And there's 2 Ducatis, 2 factory bikes at the front, super consistently again every weekend.
I said everyone wants to talk about the guy who was second in the Aprilia 1-2 today, and that's Raul Fernandez. New Zealand Sam in the Race Members Club goes, Raul Fernandez to the factory team. That's excitable. I quite like it. Pecco's front feeling on an Aprilia might be quite interesting. Maybe that's one for a few years down the line. Pecco's front feeling says, do you agree with the assessment that even though he didn't win, this race for Raul was better than Phillip Island? Now, in opposition to that, we had loads of Raul Fernandez questions after he pushed Bez for victory today. Jay Ferreira says, I'm reading a lot of Raul for factory seat around here. It's crazy how recency bias can affect one's perception. At the beginning of this season and midway through, we were debating if it was time for Raul to pack it up. Now we're shouting for a promotion. People forget he was at the bottom half a season ago. It's too early to put him anywhere. He finally adapted. I'm so happy to see him doing well, but he's shining where he is now. Give him one more season there. So, Raul Fernandez, Val.
I really liked that somebody brought up the Phillip Island versus this race comparison, because Simon won't let me lie, it's the exact comparison. I said during the race, I was like, this is more impressive to me. Yeah, this is more impressive to me than Valencia. It was very, very good. It's clear he's kind of dynamite here. We've also seen some really good testing from Fernandez here. We've seen a pretty good race from Fernandez here. Massimo Rivola acknowledged after the race that clearly it's obvious that he has something with this place, something special. I honestly did not think he had another Phillip Island level ride in him anytime soon. And suddenly this, I think, was even better. I'm very impressed there. But yeah, of course, factory seat, no. What? No, of course not. Not yet. That's way too early. He's a very young rider. He's got the time that he needed. He got the time that he deserved, and maybe a little bit of extra time compared to that. But ultimately, it helped when you're one of the greatest Moto2 rookies ever. People just believe that sooner or later they're going to coax out something special out of you, and today was something special. And on a few occasions this season, but it's still, I would say, intermittent. It looks very good. But yeah, no, factory seat. Aprilia right now would be foolish to even consider it. Aprilia can go big game shopping on current form.
Before Simon comes in, if you're watching on YouTube, you might see me look away and frown, and that's because I was quickly checking the ages of current MotoGP riders when Val says Raul is a very young rider. Because he's been around forever, relatively. He's 25. He's not Pedro Acosta, Fermin Aldiger young. I do get the point, though, that not everyone kind of peaks in the same way, and his career's been quite interesting for when you've seen the best of him and when you haven't. So you could argue he's still developing and still finding the kind of consistent performance, but he's not young. Simon?
We spoke to Massimo Rivola at the end of the day, as he generally does most Sundays now, especially whenever Aprilia had a good result. And someone asked the question about 2027. Was it you? Yeah, it was you. and he essentially said, priority number one, sign Marco Bezzecchi as soon as possible. Do it over winter if possible. Priority number two, sit back and wait and see what happens. And I think that is the Aprilia situation. That has to be the Aprilia approach, because they know that for the first time ever, they're going into a contract cycle where they have a bike that is legitimately really, 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 really good. And that a Pecco Bagnaia or a Fabio Quartararo on their bike is as assured a thing as you could have in a world where you're not racing against Marc Marquez in a factory Ducati. It's a like Fabio Quartararo on that bike right now in a world where Marc Marquez doesn't exist. World champion, done, sealed and delivered. He's that good, and the bike is that good that I absolutely see that is a package capable of beating anyone on a Ducati apart from Marc Marquez. And that wasn't the case last year, even though they ended up signing the world champion, because he signed out of spite, essentially, against Ducati. He didn't sign because the bike was as good as it is right now. And actually, if they'd known then what the bike was going to be like right now, that it probably would have been an even, he would probably have signed for a whole lot less money. So I think Aprilia, no one right now is an Aprilia contender apart from Marco Bezzecchi, because they have to just sit back and see what happens in the rider market and who comes knocking on their door above Raul Fernandez in the pecking order.
I've always used to say about that the rider strategy had to be, and I probably used the term a little incorrectly. I always call it moneyballing, but basically what I meant is they had to hunt for added value, because the riders that they want, they're not going to be the first choice for those riders. So every time they got like a big name rider, it was because Andrea Iannone got discarded by Suzuki. It was because Maverick Vinales had the Maverick Vinalesing at Yamaha, and it was because Jorge Martin left in a huff from Ducati. And we're finally in a position now where Aprilia, on its own merit, can outflank, outbid. But outbid is an important word there, because I think this is going to come up against the wall of spending. I mean, Fabio Quartararo, I'm sure, entertained the idea of joining, and they couldn't, from what we know, from what the paddock seems to always say, the financial competitive offer was not there. So it's a question of whether the financial backing will be there to stock the lineup properly, because the way Rivola also answered the Bezzecchi question to me made it sound like Marco Bezzecchi is now more aware of his value, and it's not going to be so easy to get the contract that maybe Aprilia wants him on. Maybe he didn't say that in any sort of literal sense or anything, but he did not sound 1,000,000,000,000% confident that it's going to be an easy deal to get done.
I will make a bet right now that Aprilia announced Marco Bezzecchi as their 2027 rider at the unveiling of the 2026 bike. I think it's going to be remarkably easy. He is so happy in that team. His family are happy in that team. the environment works for him. He is not a rider who is chasing money at this point in his career in any way, and and no one else is going to be able to, in the medium term, I think, outspend to deliver better performance than what Aprilia are delivering right now. I think that actually Bezzecchi will be the easiest contract renewal ever. Even if Rivola thinks it's going to be a bit tougher than it is, I think it's going to be super, super easy. And I think that the fundamental thing that has changed from kind of 18 months ago is that Fabio Quartararo is now in a position where his time to earn money is starting to run out and he wants results more than cash. And that will make him an easier person to poach by offering him less money and a better bike.
My look to the left to look at the screen was to check that Fabio Quartararo is 26. So, well, we're in rider's age and trajectories. One last thing on Aprilia before we move on, very quickly, because I think this will be an off-season topic in quite a big way. But Duncan Bertram asks, how important has Raul Fernandez's late season run been for keeping Trackhouse in MotoGP? Will we finally see some sponsorship on the bike next year? Yeah, Trackhouse and Justin Marks, the owner, are enthusiastic about MotoGP, but it's a team we keep seeing stories about stakes being sold or uncertainties. Simon, what's your take on what is going on that front?
Justin Marks is way too smart a businessman to sell an asset that he bought for €5 million for what it's worth now, which is probably about 25 to 30 million euros, whenever he thinks that in another 5 years of Liberty ownership, it may be worth 60 million euros.
We've talked about the Aprilia 1-2 that ended the race. Let's talk about what happened before the start of the race, because it was frankly nuts. Frankie Morbidelli is missing the post-race test, the start of the 2026 preparation, because he's got a hand injury from basically ploughing into Aleix Espargaro. Of all people, Frankie, for you to plough into on the grid and have an injurious crash, you chose Espargaro. Simon, for the benefit of actually, before we actually describe what, I'm just going to throw in some noises made by the Race Members Club about this. Got JT going, Franco? We've got OC going, what happened to Morbidelli? Marianne Lazowski, what on earth happened to Morbidelli before the start? Todd Bryant calls it a new low from Franco. He seems to be becoming a complete hazard. Frank Quinn says, will you make up some Franco Morbidelli bingo cards for next year? No, Frank, because can you imagine where to start with that? And would I have had any hope of guessing this? It's just too off the wall. So, okay, with that said, sympathy to Frankie Morbidelli, because an injury now is just really frustrating and you don't wish that on anybody. But, crikey, Simon, what happened?
Todd is right, it's a new low. It really is. Franco come onto the grid, and normally we see Franco switch off his brain immediately after he's done a qualifying lap, and this time he switched off his brain halfway through the warm-up lap. Came onto the grid late as one of the last bikes to form up in the grid, was way out of position because he was over on the left-hand side of the grid, even though his grid spot was in the right-hand side against the wall. Decided to start picking his way through bikes, having to make up like 5 or 6 rows to get to where he was supposed to be in the grid. Aleix stopped in his grid spot in what is a completely normal way for a MotoGP rider to stop in their grid spot at the minute, which is slam the front wheel, do a stoppie, lock the right head device down, and then be in position. And Franco just wasn't paying attention and rode into the back of him. Kind of smashed into Aleix's bike, cartwheeled across, kind of spun across the track, ended up kind of bouncing off the wall on his own side of the grid eventually. Broke his hand in the process, trashed Aleix's bike, dented the radiator, or dented the exhausts, damaged the exhaust valve sensor, so ripped a foot peg off, kind of. Basically left Aleix's bike that it wasn't producing torque, wasn't producing engine braking. One of the foot pegs was loose. Aleix had to retire from the race. Franco got back to the pits, and I think switched to started from pit lane, rode one lap, and realised that his hand hurt quite badly, which is because he'd broken it. Came into the pits. Just wasn't paying attention. Just was not paying attention at one of the most critical parts of the weekend. Like less than a month after someone was really badly hurt because someone wasn't paying attention on a siding lap in a not completely different circumstance, but actually this is even worse. I mean, We've tried to defend Frankie recently because he's taken a bit of unfair flack for having his brain switched off, but this was the stupidest thing he's done all year. It really was. I should say that despite the massive amount of beef between him and Aleix over the past while, Aleix was like quite per Frankie. He's hurt himself. No one deserves that about things. Quite magnanimous, despite the fact that it ended his race too. But I mean, he was really, really lucky to get away with it. That he should be starting next season with a double long lap penalty for this. He really should, because it's no different from causing a crash because he's touring in the racing line, except that Aleix was stopped when he hit him.
Yeah, it's catastrophic. I mean, it's just terrible. I mean, you really. I'm maybe more personally annoyed at it, despite not having had my bike damaged or my hand broken, because I did maybe spend a bit of the last couple of weekends going like, hey, can we stop with the internet memeing? Because it's really, like, it's getting over-egged, and then any sort of thing that he's ever shown on screen just becomes a barrage of jokes that I don't find particularly funny, mostly because they're not particularly funny. Well, if he didn't get injured, this was quite funny. It's just bad. I don't know. Anything you say feels both like piling on and also insufficient for how terrible that was.
It was interesting. I haven't heard how Aleix phrased it yet. I've seen the transcript of his debrief with you guys, and it felt like he was trying not to pile on when Morbidelli is hurt, not to call for penalties or really rant, but at the same time there was such an undercurrent of literally he wasn't looking where he was going as he pulled onto the grid for the start of a MotoGP race. And that's, we spent, me in particular, a long time kind of mocking Alex Rins for cycling into the back of a van while texting, but at least that wasn't in a competitive situation. At least that was on an actual bicycle. It was still season-wreckingly daft. Yeah, Simon.
It felt like, whereas Racer Aleix would have called for Frankie to be banned from the next 6 races out of anger, test rider Aleix was like, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
That was the real thought of it. I didn't want to pile on, but at the same time was obviously just deeply frustrated by I think what he's seen over the course of the year, like the rest of us has, because it's at the point now where Frankie's distraction is unprofessional in a very dangerous environment.
Yeah. Val, you raised the point in the column that you wrote for the race website this week about Morbidelli and how his reputation has been getting a lot more flack. His reputation's been the thing that's been getting the flack more than the actual actions to a degree recently. You said in that it's kind of career existential now almost. It's like if he's going to have a ride into 2027 for anything other than Valentino Rossi's sympathy reasons, he's got to kind of show that he can focus on what he's actually doing, not ride other people off the road and not plow into them on the grid. I really feel like this will not have helped at all.
No.
But at what point, this is kind of to both of you really, though Val's been a defender recently, he would not have got this chance to stay on the grid, I strongly feel, without that Valentino Rossi relationship that meant he could slot into that hole. His last few moves have been kind of falling upwards onto bikes that his performance hasn't really merited. And actually, this season, I think his performance has been fine. Decent enough.
Yeah.
Fine. Not objectionable at all. Not his peak. I genuinely thought what he was doing for a lot of 2020, okay, with a well-sorted year-old bike, was great. But this has been fine. Whereas previous seasons, like the Pramac season, was kind of all right but compromised. The last Yamaha seasons were pretty rubbish mostly. It feels like he's on the grid still because he's a Rossi guy. Could that still hold? Even with doing things like this, are we at a point now where the chances have kind of run out?
It could hold, but there's going to be if there's going to be pressure. Now, I do think we've kind of run out of fantasy world scenarios where he stays on the grid for any other reason, unfortunately. Even though, again, I think he's been reasonably okay in terms of pace this season or whatever, in terms of he's kind of improved his race longevity a little bit. Qualifying's fine. It's just, it's one calamity after another sometimes, but, well, not sometimes, quite often, but otherwise it's not been particularly objectionable. But the thing is if you're going to, these grid slots will come at a premium with the quality of Moto2 guys that we have coming up, with the quality of some of the people who are trying to stay on the grid one way or another. With what Ducati's interest will be in bolstering its rider ranks, because clearly, the whole Ducati conversation we had It does not help that, for instance, Franco Morbidelli is not one of the riders it can count on to hold the fort if Marc Marquez goes down with an injury. I mean, ideally, one of those VR46 guys, if not Morbidelli's on it, maybe Pedro Costa's on it, and then you're winning the championship with Pedro Costa on the VR46 Ducati, in a Rossi livery, etc. Yeah. That sounds pretty nice from a marketing perspective. So, yeah, there's going to be obviously pressure, and he needs to safeguard himself from it as much as possible. Also, people, I imagine, within the team will start feeling a certain way that, okay, but maybe we just move him to some other project or help him settle in somewhere else, help him find something different. Because the issue is the speed is not enough, and certainly the peaks are not enough to put up with this kind of thing. Who's the other kind of menace on the grid as of late a little bit? Mr. Fermin Aldeguer has been quite not massively well behaved occasionally on track recently, although not so much this weekend. I don't particularly have a huge issue with what he was doing this weekend, but
we'll get to that.
The peaks of Fermin are worth this putting up with. In Fermin, you see a guy who can win you a bunch of races in the future, maybe fight for the championship. Franco's win races, fight for championship ship has sailed, crashed, burned. So then the pressure is going to be to use that seat for the next guy, for Danny Delgado, for David Alonso, for whatever other Moto2 guy I can think of.
So 2 things. One is that, lights have just gone out in the media center and then come back on again. One thing is that you said about Trackhouse being potentially for sale. If there's a team in the MotoGP grid that's for sale, it's VR46. And the second press release that any new owner of VR46 will send out is Franco Morbidelli will not be a part of the team in 2027 if that team were to be sold next year. That to me is the team that I can see being on the market, because Valentino Rossi is a businessman, but also the team is run by his friends. They don't want to spend the effort. I think that it needs to elevate it the way that we're going to see teams be elevated in the next year and a half. And I can see that being a team that they will happily take a payday to say, all right, that's been a fun experiment. Let's give it to someone else now. And then Morbidelli loses his seat. The other thing, the fundamental difference between him and Fermin Aldeguer as the grid's 2 biggest menaces, aside from their results, is the fact that Fermin's can be excused by him being a 19-year-old. Fermin's like this because he's a 19-year-old rookie. Frankie has not been the same rider that he used to be, especially in terms of being a danger, since he had a massive traumatic brain injury and took a long time out of the sport and came back acting as a different character on track. He also, following that big crash, went last weekend and had probably another concussion in another big crash at the same circuit, and is riding 5 days after a concussion. And
it's an absolutely fair point. I was making a weird face because I was just trying to think back to his last bit of a Yamaha season. I was trying to think, what was the point where I started noticing how much of a menace he was being? Was that the Pramac year? Was that the end of Yamaha?
Aleix I feel like slapped him.
That was Yamaha time.
That was Yamaha time, yes. It was.
Was it? I thought that was the start of the Ducati time. Okay.
I still think it's fair to say that it has been this period, Pramac onwards, when the main reason you think of Morbidelli is because he's running someone off the road and acting like there's no other bikes around. But I would also think the second half of the Yamaha season, that happened, but you're mostly going, wow, he's slow compared to Quartararo. So that was almost hiding some of it, but still,
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. But I just even taking the big crash out of it, he's not a rookie.
No, he's 30. I looked up his age just now too. He's 30.
Yeah.
On this topic, and this is probably more one for Val to answer. I mean, Elliot Davison was one of many people going, what the hell is up with Morbidelli? The bit of Elliot's question that was really interesting, because it really chimes with me, was I've only recently got into MotoGP over the last 2 seasons. I've always been a bit perplexed by the warm-up lap being so chaotic. Should an F1 style warm-up lap be implemented? So to me, I'm not a bike racing lifer, I got into it in the 2000s when I was like mid-20s already. And one of the first things that surprised me, as a kind of 90s F1 fan who thought people stayed in order on the formation lap and it was all kind of civilized and you left the grid in grid order, you stayed in basic grid order. If you didn't, that was quite controversial. And then you're lined up tidily. Seeing the field completely change order and position and go all over the place in the warm-up lap and then like whiz in between each other to reform on the grid was like, why are they doing that? Can't they just stay in a polite queue? It's never really made sense to me, other than the fact that maybe it doesn't matter on a bike because it is, in theory, that small that you're not going to run into somebody when doing this. But Val, have you ever had this, as someone who kind of started in cars and came to bikes a bit later, have you had the same thought? And Simon, can you excuse this behaviour by bike racers? Can't they just go in a queue?
I have had the same thought, but I grew to accept it pretty quickly. I have to be honest. It's just, they clearly. It is different enough to where I understand why some riders are just used to a lot more than in car racing. It's kind of part of the race for them in a way, more so, I would say, than in car racing, more so than just even procedurally, the way they sort of warm themselves up or get themselves in the groove, more so than we tend to have in car racing. So maybe ideally there would not be the swarming, overtaking, etc., blah, 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 but it would be quite, I think, a big ask for a lot of them to rewire themselves.
Yeah, two reasons. One is the contact patch on a bike's tires versus the contact patch in an F1 car's tires, and the need to get heat into them. The other is that I don't think, I know there is no place in the entire MotoGP calendar where you can't safely have bikes 3 wide on track.
Yes.
And I'd imagine there's lots of places in the F1 circuit, on the F1 calendar, where you can't safely have 2 cars on track. And that's not knocking it, but like you can't put 2 cars on track alongside each other all the way around Monaco, can you?
No, exactly. Yeah. Having said that, F1 is very good at staying in the polite queue, with the amount of like brake checking for warming up and weaving and that kind of thing for tyre warming, I've made it sound a lot more tidy than it actually is. They're not overtaking each other, but they are basically being very messy in every other respect. But yeah, Elliot saying that really struck a chord, because that was my first thoughts when I first got into bike racing was, this is a bit nuts, and the race hadn't started yet. This weekend featured a first for the 2025 season, I would say. People being openly quite grumpy about Simon Crafar's stewarding regime, which so far has been welcomed as like a good thing, quite rider-friendly, little stuff, like not giving someone a long lapse they've come back from hospital. You know, there's lots of good stuff that Simon Crafar's done this year, but he got some pretty serious flack this weekend. Jack Miller was the most vocal person, although we have the strange situation on Saturday of Joan Mir having taken out teammate Luca Marini say, if I won't get a penalty for that, because if you penalise that, there'll be no racing, and then of course he gets a penalty for it. But Jack Miller was one that really kicked off. Motorsport Mike said, did Jack Miller deserve his +3 positions penalty for an incident with Vinales? And why did he forget to do it? Because he then had that turned into a long lap because he didn't actually drop 3 positions. Did he ignore or forget it? He must have been told. And Annie says, do you think stewarding has actually been inconsistent this year? Miller's line was that there was, let's get the bleep noise out, Rob or Johnny, whoever produces this. Inconsistency hasn't been in the f***ing picture, I think was Jack's phrase. Were they right to give Miller a penalty this time, continues Annie, but not for Mean on previous occasions? Now, I always thought Simon Crafar was fairly tight with Miller. Not that would actually influence his stewarding.
It better not.
No, but what I mean is they are friends. I always felt in his pit lane punditry role, Simon was a lot more charitable towards Jack at some of his lows than a lot of people, us included, were. So it was so striking that of all the people to kick off, it was Miller who was the one whose patience broke first, basically. Simon, was Jack right to be that annoyed?
First of all, I think I don't think they've been inconsistent. I don't think they've been that inconsistent. I think there's been maybe missteps, yes, but nothing like the Freddie Spencer era of that we're going to pull this penalty out of a hat, and some of the balls in the hat say no penalty, and some of them say 10 race ban. I don't think it's been that bad. I think it's been all right pretty much all year, and it is worth noting that. As Jack and I were joking after his debrief, it has taken 22 races for anyone to say anything negative about Simon Crafar, really. Whereas we've had seasons where within 2 or 3 races, Jack Miller was calling him a see you next Tuesday in his media debrief.
Yeah.
So actually, I think that kind of testifies to it. I think Jack Miller wouldn't have said the things that he said if we hadn't been in the 8th back-to-back weekend of the year, and if he hadn't just had a run-in with Firmino. If there'd been a week between Portimao and here, he wouldn't have said what he said, because he wouldn't have been as mad at Firmino as he was. So I think that's part of it. I think it's people are a bit short-tempered at the end of the year, and people are kind of inventing their reasons to be mad at random things, including Simon Crafar. So I don't think that's particularly awful. And I think Jack was a bit unfair, to be perfectly honest. Maybe the penalty was wrong because the penalty was weird. It felt a bit like drop 3 places was a random thing. And I think part of the problem with that was the delay, the pause between issuing the penalty and Jack serving the penalty, Jack being told what the penalty was, because dropping 3 places, whatever they decided or whatever had happened, would have put Jack back like a second, whereas he'd pulled a bit of a gap by the time it came to drop 3 positions, and he was like clear of the group that had annoyed him. And yeah, so I think they should have just given him a long lap straight away, or they should have given him a drop 1 position. And that would have been probably better than what happened in either world. Jack 100% saw it and decided to ignore it.
Yes, he admitted that basically.
100%. He straight up told us that. And the reason he didn't ignore the long lap is because he thought if he didn't serve it, then they might carry it forward to Sunday's race. So he probably should serve that.
I think Jack has a point, but not in the sense that I feel particularly bad about him getting a penalty, but I did think Firmino got away with one, or maybe with a couple last weekend. And for me, there's no particular reason why Firmino should have got away with those, and Jack not get away with what he did this weekend. I think, unfortunately, in my current view, the visibility of incidents and the after effect of incidents and how much of a fuss the opposing rider is making. My feeling with the current stewarding regime, which is, again, it's different to the Spencer one, because under the Spencer one, it just felt like things were just happening. Things just happened. You know, as Simon said, you know, things just happened. Under this one, I feel there is always an innate desire not to penalize unless something happened that's big enough to where you can't kind of get away with it. That's not my necessarily view of racing. I don't particularly like that, but I'm sure if next time I say hi to Simon Crafar in the media center somewhere, and if he pulls me over and asks me what my view of racing is, and he hears what it is, he'll be like, "Oh, I hate that. That's terrible. I will never do anything that you like." That's not, because he is, he's kind of a racer's racer. He likes a bit of arging, and
should say that most of the MotoGP grid agrees with that view as well, even if you don't.
And I in that sense, that it does surprise me then that Miller did not get away with this one, but also he was further offline. I think that plays a big role. I think that's it was just visibly wronger than what happens between Aldeguer and Binder in the previous weekend, whatever it was. It feels like ages ago already, because I've been ill 50 different times since then.
Oh, so the Binder thing didn't cost Binder any positions, did it?
Well, it cost him a position in being illegally overtaken by Firmino Aldeguer, but sure.
Yeah. But Firmino lost 5 positions in the Jack thing.
And we talk about the one that left Binder's aero missing as well. Yeah. That's probably had some kind of consequence.
No, I don't buy that. Didn't cost him anything at all. He got moved out of the way. It cost him the defensive race he was running against
Firmino got sent back 5 positions by Jack.
Fair enough. I agree.
There's a very obvious difference there.
And had his arm ripped off the handlebar. For me, another interesting moment of dissent was Joan Mir, who said that there's no way he should get a penalty for tucking the front and taking down Luca Marini on Saturday, even though he said all the sorries to Marini and the team, but he was like, there's no way you can penalize that, because if you penalize it, nobody will overtake, which, by the way, riders love to trot that one out, and it is 100,000% pure grade horse shit. So I want to make that clear. It's total nonsense. And that's not personal to Joan Mir, because he's not the first to say it. He won't be the last to say it. And every rider who says it, they have to know in their heart of hearts, total nonsense. But he did kind of have a point in that I thought this was an overtake we'd get away with, because the bike only hit the other rider once it was already, the front was stuck, the bike was gone, the bike was separated from the lead rider. He brought up specifically the Ayagura move at Sachsenring that I don't remember who it hit, but it might have been John Mir. I don't remember who I hit at Sachsenring, but he also lost the bike going through a corner, trying to take it faster maybe than it should have. And it appears that the only difference there was that John Mir was silly enough to go on record and say, yeah, I was attempting to overtake Luca Marini, whereas Ayagura maybe didn't do that. But
that does change it.
If you say so. I mean, does it?
I think it does. I think it changes the dynamic of it because you're going to be more on the limit when you're trying to stuff up the inside of someone. So if you're crashing because you're closer to the limit, there's an element of blame that sits with you there. The other example, obviously, of someone not getting penalised for crashing someone out was our friends Franco and Aleix at Silverstone, because Aleix crashed and his bike rolled through the corner and hit Franco, and Franco demanded that Aleix be penalised, but it was just physics. And that's a very different situation from, I think there's a different situation between crashing in a corner and your bike hitting someone and crashing in a corner as you're trying to overtake someone. Fundamentally, for me, those are two very different things.
No, you're right. It's just
it's because of the risk thing,
I need to rewatch the Agura thing specifically, but I do think it's also you have to take into account more than the stated aim, the intention to overtake. For me, it's like a reasonable expectation of awareness of a rider on the outside. For me, would be the sort of the thing I would want to look at. And again,
But then the rider's only on the outside because you've put him there. Yeah, and I think that Mir was deflecting a little bit. I think he was like unnecessarily angry about it, all things considered. Especially like 24 hours later.
It wasn't his finest hour in a Honda stint that has involved a lot of this sort of thing where he's mostly taken out other people or just himself instead. I mean, fair play, like Mir's body language in the gravel trap straight away as soon as he saw who he'd wiped out was like, no, I'm so sorry, which was, admirable, but messy.
We're going to have an off-season conversation about John Mir, aren't we? It's going to be a fun obviously conversation.
Yeah. So on that topic, actually, there's so many questions in the Race Members Club today where I've just kind of put in a different folder going, that's a winter one, that's a winter one, that's a winter one, because there's, we've when you're in these race by race podcasts, there's so many things you have to put aside because you've got an hour slot and you've got a couple of big topics, but there's like wider stuff, and that's what the winter is for. I'd love to say we're going to really properly plan loads of immediately great winter content, but some bastards put 3 back-to-back F1 races and a title decider across the next few weekends, so thanks for that. But we'll do our best around that to make some lovely MotoGP winter plans as well. And the range of questions that all of you in the Race Members Club are asking are just lovely. Like, anytime I'm in a slightly grumpy or stressed mood before a podcast, as soon as I start pulling the podcast together, I'm just like, oh, this is going to be fun. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. We're going to end on the questions we've had. Go on, Simon, before I give you a chance to slate Valencia.
No. I've just spotted something that we never get to breaking news in the podcast, do we?
Very rarely.
I've just spotted something. I've got breaking news.
Go on.
I've just glanced up and the timing screens are still on and they've just updated it with test data for the test.
Yeah.
Number 7, Toprak. We know what number he's running.
Yeah, exactly.
Which has been a real secret.
Isn't the V4 Yamaha Augusto was testing this weekend number 7? It might just be the Yamaha test number.
No, it says 7 Toprak. Look up above you at the screen.
No, but he might have just inherited that. Also, I can't see the screen from here. I have to be honest. But I don't think that guarantees that's the number he's running.
I mean,
is Fernandez on there as well? Somewhere?
No, he's not. But there was a rumor he was going to run number 7 anyway. So I think that confirms it. I'm claiming that as confirmed. Augusto's not riding at the test, so he wouldn't be on there.
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah. I just looked up and saw my ceiling, as I haven't got a timing screen.
Oh, and Moreira's on there as number 11.
I have to confess, I haven't got his current number in my head, so I don't
10,
know if he's had to give it up.
Yeah,
yes,
Marini's.
That makes sense. Okay, just moving one number's quite nice, actually. Just quite tidy rather than going, what's my second favourite number in the whole world? Just like shuffling along one.
I know Jorge Martin's on there as 89 again.
But there is sort of a conversation about, because Martin's number used to be 88 through the junior career, and that is being given up now by Miguel Oliveira. So he could take it if he wanted to. And the way you spoke to him, Simon, I think he probably won't, also because he's won with the 89, but I don't think he totally dismissed it 100%.
He talked about using the 1 versus the 89, going back to the 89. And then I asked him about, are you going to 89 or 88? And he was like, good question.
Yeah.
That is,
anyway, this is a completely off-topic
I've quite enjoyed it, though, because I'd forgotten that 89 wasn't his real number. Yeah. I like riders and drivers having their own proper numbers. There's something nicely evocative about it in a really, really nerdy way.
Yeah.
Anyway, I said, Simon, we're going to finish off by giving you a chance to slate Valencia, so let's do that now. We've got a few questions about this place being the season finale venue. You've got more number news?
Yeah, because I've just done all the maths on it.
Right.
I think this is the right numbers because Moreira's number 11 and Nicola Buliga has been changed to number 16 despite running number 11 this weekend. Because that's his number.
Fair enough.
So, yeah. So it would make sense that he's no longer allowed to use that number in a wildcard or a test. Because look at that, we've put it all together.
In 12 months' time, when we record this, staring at the same time screen, you can tell us what Buliga's going to when he comes into MotoGP as a full-time rider for 2027 and has to...
Number 16, we know now.
Yeah, actually, true. So what's his connection to 16?
No idea.
I'll find out on Tuesday. Anyway, let's do the last question to get this podcast done. Northern Bastard says, is there any appetite at all to stop hosting the last round or any round at Valencia because it is always pretty boring to watch? Could Liberty change this? Even Barcelona has slightly better racing, maybe even Mugello. I imagine Mugello's weather isn't ideal right now. Frank Quinn says, what would need to happen to have a different venue for the close of a season? Valencia doesn't lend itself to engaging racing. Both in the in-car chats, we ended up having a chat about it in the end of the 2015 season specials on the Race Members Club as well. I'm not the greatest fan of watching Valencia as a viewer. Feelings are mixed about Valencia as a place to actually go to as well. No insults like the area, the city, whatever. That, no problems. As a track, not the most spine-tingling way to finish a season. But would it ever go anywhere else?
Well, I mean, if there was one thing that was going to move MotoGP away from the Spanish domination of the calendar, it would probably be a new American owner.
Las Vegas it is then, sorted.
Look, ultimately it's clear that the Race Members Club is pining for the idea of the MotoGP season finishing in Abu Dhabi. So,
no, just because.
I mean,
if
you were Liberty with your investment in Vegas, and with the way that the US motorsport culture, especially two-wheel, drifts towards the West Coast, you'd just build a circuit outside Vegas, wouldn't you?
It's not a bad shout, although when they start building... Well, I was going to say, when the history of circuits built in America for World Championship, F1 racing or whatever is a bit grim, like the Indianapolis road course was rubbish and stuff like that. But actually, Austin's great, so... Fine.
The Indianapolis road course did draw more of a crowd, MotoGP crowd, than Coda does.
Yeah.
And we can't go to Laguna Seca, so...
We should say that, like, for all the... for obviously this is not anybody's idea of the perfect season finale venue, and racing in Europe on November 16th is not anybody's best thought ever.
Aprilia have a Christmas tree in hospitality. Bastards.
I mean, clearly, attendance is pretty good, as we've, I think, gathered through the traffic sometimes, occasionally. I know it's not been sort of managed the best way, but it's not an unpopular place to go to.
There's the understatement of the year.
And I might be just jaded, and I have less of a right to be jaded. Can you have a good season finale venue after 22 goddamn rounds?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. This whole
if
weekend felt like...
not a factor, then we finish at Assen.
Yeah, I was going to say, the most, fan jazzy European venues are the ones you really would not go to in November, basically.
I bet you it's 15 degrees warmer today in Phelps Island than it was when we raced there.
Yeah.
Just saying.
This is the paradox, isn't it? If you're going to run a calendar this long at a time when really your heartland and your most passionate fans are in Europe.
Yeah, but there's I mean, joking aside, and there's an argument for not having your season finale in the heartland.
Yeah.
Because okay.
Because your first round, your last round, people are going to watch anyway.
True.
Yeah. Abu Dhabi.
Use them to grow the sport.
As
Well,
we
people are
all
going to watch your
Qatar.
last round if your championship's still open.
Qatar.
honestly, yeah. I joke,
There's worse places than Qatar.
Yeah. Racing wise, I can see that. That's quite.
No. That's what I mean.
a
Like
cool
racing
place
wise,
for it.
there are worse places. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Well, we've rewritten the calendar, but these guys can't leave Valencia yet because they've got a test to start 2026 in just 2 days' time. So we'll be back with an extra podcast after that. There may be a bit less to get excited about than this time last year when we had Marc Marquez jumping on a red Ducati for the postseason Barcelona test, but there's still something quite interesting about seeing people in different places. Top Rack's MotoGP career starting properly. There'll be a bit to look out for and a bit to chat about on Tuesday. So we'll be back with you on Wednesday, most likely, to round it all up.